They never told you the truth about wealth. They couldn't, because if you knew it, really knew it, not as a theory, not as a vague promise whispered in motivational books, but as an undeniable reality pulsing in your blood, you would stop playing their game. You would stop being obedient. You would stop chasing the crumbs they drop to keep you moving in circles. The truth is this: wealth was never just about money. It was never about the number on your bank account, the car you drive, the house you dream of one day owning. Those things are only reflections, smoke on the surface of something much deeper. Real wealth is a state of mind, a frequency of being that bends reality toward you instead of making you run after it. It is a knowing so profound, so natural, that you were born with it, and yet they made sure you would forget. From the first moment you opened your eyes, you were free. You didn't doubt that you belonged here. You didn't wonder if you deserved to be loved, fed, protected. You existed in perfect harmony with life, and life responded in kind. But then the training began. Subtle at first. A word here, a no there. A quiet lesson in waiting, in shrinking, in proving yourself worthy of what was already yours. They wrapped you in rules that felt like truth. Life is hard. Money doesn't grow on trees. Only a few make it to the top. Be grateful for what you have, and don't ask for more. You didn't know they were chains, because they were handed to you by people who loved you, people who were already enslaved to the same script. And slowly you stopped commanding reality and started begging for its leftovers. Meanwhile, the few who know the secret live in another dimension of thought. They were taught or discovered that the world responds not to struggle but to certainty, not to fear but to alignment. They do not ask life for permission. They decide. They don't just believe they can be wealthy, they inhabit the state of wealth long before a single dollar arrives. And that frequency changes everything. Opportunities gravitate toward them. Doors open where walls once stood. Reality bends as if it knows their name. You were born with that same code, but you were programmed to forget, because a population that remembers its power cannot be controlled. And yet even now a part of you stirs. A whisper under the noise says, "This isn't how it's supposed to be. I was meant for more." That's not greed. That's memory. A memory of a truth. You lived before they trained you to be small. The secret isn't theirs alone, it's yours, it always has been. But you'll never touch it until you first see the bars they built around your mind. Before we continue, tell me in the comments where you're watching this from. And if this truth is already echoing inside you, hit like and subscribe, because what comes next will not just change how you think about wealth, it will change how you think about yourself. You were never born to be powerless. You were trained to be powerless. That is the part they never admit, because if you saw the machinery that shaped your thoughts, you would dismantle it piece by piece and walk away free. The conditioning began before you could even speak. Every command, every sigh of disappointment, every "be realistic" became a thread in a web meant to hold you down. And by the time you were old enough to dream on your own, you didn't know where their voice ended and yours began. They wrote your script for you, a script designed to make you wait, to beg, to hope for approval instead of claiming what was already yours. And every day you've been living that script, mistaking it for truth, calling it life. Look around you. The system is perfectly built to keep you disconnected from your original power. Schools teach you to memorize facts, not to think freely. Jobs teach you to trade time for crumbs, not to build empires. Religion tells you virtue is in suffering, that wanting more is sinful, that only something outside yourself can grant you abundance. And media, the endless hum of distraction, keeps you too numb, too tired, too entertained to ever ask why the world is structured the way it is. This is not by accident. It's programming, a careful design to make you forget that reality bends to your state of mind, to make you believe wealth is out there somewhere, guarded, scarce, handed only to the chosen few. And the rich, the ones who know the mental secret, they are not playing the same game. You are. They are not even on the same board. I once heard a man say, "I spent 20 years trying to be enough until I realized I already was." That's the difference between their world and yours. The rich do not spend years asking if they deserve abundance. They don't measure their worth in hours worked or sacrifices made. They understand that life gives according to your belief of what you are allowed to receive. They have learned to stay in a frequency where opportunity is inevitable. And You were trained to stay in a frequency where you feel guilty for wanting more than survival. That is not human nature. That is conditioning. It was planted in you, repeated until it became part of your identity, so that you would never step beyond the lines drawn for you. And now think of how often you've silenced your own knowing. Every time you had an idea that felt too big, too unrealistic, too much for someone like you. Every time you swallowed your dreams because you were afraid of standing out, afraid of being called selfish, afraid of failing. That wasn't you. That was the program speaking, the voice of the system echoing in your mind, making you small enough to fit inside their world. But your true self has never left. It waits beneath the noise, beneath the scripts, beneath the false rules of how life works. The same power that wealthy minds know, the same state of being they guard like treasure, is buried under everything you were taught to believe. And once you see the bars of the cage, you can start remembering what freedom felt like. And once you remember, the system loses its hold on you forever. You've felt it before, haven't you? That quiet, gnawing thought that maybe life isn't supposed to be this heavy, this uncertain, this exhausting. That maybe the constant struggle isn't a flaw in you, but a feature of the game you were born into. Deep down, you know something's wrong. The world feels like it was built to keep you running, but never arriving. Working, but never truly living. And you're right. The game is rigged. Not by chance, not by fate, but by design. And the most dangerous part of this design is not the laws you can see, not the cages built of metal, but the invisible chains wrapped around your mind. The rich know a secret, a way of thinking, a state of being that bends reality to their will. The system knows this too, and it knows one thing above all. If you ever remembered this truth, you would stop obeying. So, they built a world to keep you forgetting every single day. From the time you were a child, you were shown pictures of success that had nothing to do with freedom. You saw your parents working themselves to exhaustion just to survive, teachers telling you to be realistic, to not ask for too much, to fit into the mold. You were shown movies, ads, stories of the lucky few who became rich, as if wealth were a rare miracle handed to the chosen, never something you could simply claim. You were trained to believe that life is hard, that money is scarce, that only endless sacrifice and obedience could maybe someday earn you a taste of freedom. No one mentioned that reality itself listens to the story you believe about it. No one told you that your mind was not meant to chase abundance but to command it. The wealthy live by this truth. They hold a state of certainty so strong that opportunities align without force. And you were trained to doubt, to question yourself, to wait. This is not ignorance. This is programming. Entire institutions exist to make sure you never wake up to who you are. Schools teach you to repeat information, not to question the script you were born into. Jobs keep you trading your time for crumbs, convincing you that working harder is the only path forward, even though you've seen countless hard workers stay poor. Religion tells you that wanting more is selfish or sinful, that only something outside yourself can grant you abundance. Media floods you with distractions, endless noise to keep you too tired, too numb, too busy comparing yourself to fictional lives to ever stop and ask, why does the world only seem abundant for a few? The truth is simple, because those few remember the code. They guard it not with vaults but with lies, with a system designed to erase your memory of your own power. The secret has always been hiding in plain sight. The world does not respond to your struggle. It responds to your state of being. The rich were taught this or discovered it, and they live as if abundance is inevitable. And that's why it is. You were born with the same code, the same ability to shape reality, but you were conditioned to believe you had none. They needed you obedient, dreaming of freedom but never touching it. And every day you stay inside that program, you unknowingly keep the system alive. But the moment you see the truth, the first crack forms in their design, and there's no way to unsee it once you do. There is something almost cruel about the way the system works. Not only does it strip you of your natural power, but it programs you to fight against anyone or anything that tries to remind you of it. The training runs so deep that abundance feels foreign, suspicious, even wrong when it gets close to you. You've seen it in your own life. How many times have you had a big idea, a vision of something greater, only to hear a voice in your head whisper, "Who do you think you are?" How many times have you looked at someone living freely, creating wealth on their own terms, and felt a sting of disbelief or envy because some part of you thinks freedom like that isn't meant for you. That isn't natural. That is conditioning, planted in you long before you could defend yourself. And it's not just in you. It's in everyone around you, a collective hypnosis that keeps the entire world asleep while a few play with the rules of reality. From childhood, every moment that could have reminded you of your power was interrupted by someone repeating the script of limitation. When you expressed confidence, you were called arrogant. When you reached for more, you were told you were greedy. When you questioned authority, you were punished or shamed until you learned silence. Slowly, you began policing yourself. You stopped dreaming loudly. You stopped taking up space. You started lowering your expectations, not because it felt right, but because the system taught you that this was safe. They built a prison and convinced you it was home. The tragedy is not that you were locked away. It's that you were convinced you belonged there. The wealthy mindset that you were trained to ignore doesn't just accept abundance, it assumes it. It's not about effort or luck. It's about identity. They don't wonder if they are worthy of wealth, they know they are, and reality mirrors that knowing back to them. But you were given the opposite identity, one built on fear, scarcity, and the constant need to prove yourself. They made sure you associated money with struggle, success with sacrifice, freedom with luck, so that the very thought of effortless wealth feels impossible. Worse, they taught you to distrust those who claim otherwise. Anyone who whispers that life could be abundant is called delusional, a scammer, a dreamer out of touch with reality. But that reality was manufactured. It was a mental cage, passed from one obedient mind to the next. The result is a world where most people reject the very thing they desire most. You've felt it. An idea for a business, a chance to ask for more, a moment where you could step into something bigger, but you hesitate, sabotage, retreat. Not because you can't, but because you've been taught not to. The system trained you to distrust your own power so completely that even when truth knocks on your door, you doubt it's real. This is how they keep you in line. This is how they make sure only a few remember the secret, by burying it under layers of fear, guilt, and false humility. But beneath all of that, your original nature is untouched, waiting. And the moment you remember it, the moment you truly believe you were never meant to beg for scraps, everything you've been taught about wealth and life will unravel, and you will never fit back into the cage again. They gave you a picture of freedom, but it was never real. It was a leash painted gold, a cage with windows wide enough to trick you into believing you were free. They told you that freedom was a job title, a steady paycheck, a house with a mortgage you'd spend decades paying. They told you that freedom was having just enough to buy the weekend you needed to recover from the week you hated. They told you that freedom was choice, as long as you chose from the options they laid out for you. And for years, maybe your whole life, you believed them. You believed that if you worked harder, climbed higher, sacrificed more, you'd earn the right to stop running. But you never did. Because the freedom they sold you was not real. It was a product designed to keep you moving, buying, obeying, never questioning why you were always so tired and still not free. You see, real freedom is not given. It's remembered. And that is exactly what they fear you doing. The system thrives on invisible chains, contracts, debts, expectations, unspoken rules that keep you playing a game you can't win. They tell you that money is scarce to keep you desperate. They tell you that time is limited to keep you rushing. They tell you that safety only exists in conformity, so you never dare to step outside the lines. But every now and then, you catch a glimpse of truth, a moment when you see someone living by different rules, someone who seems to move through life effortlessly, attracting opportunities you've been taught are rare. And instead of asking how they're doing it, you've been trained to think they're lucky, they're special, it's not for people like me. That's not truth. That's programming. The wealthy mindset isn't magic, it's memory. It's the remembrance that the world mirrors the state you live in, not the work you do. But this truth has been hidden beneath an illusion so convincing that you've mistaken the cage for life itself. You've been told that freedom is waiting for you at the end of the grind, that abundance is reserved for the chosen, that the rules are fixed and unchangeable. But those rules only exist in minds that agree to them. And here's the cruel brilliance of the system. They made you police your own cage. You've been taught to laugh at dreamers, to shame ambition, to defend the very limits that hold you down. You call it being realistic, but it's just fear, dressed as wisdom, passed from one obedient generation to the next. There are testimonies whispered and ignored from people who broke free. A woman once said, "I thought freedom was a paycheck until I realized it was a choice." A man confessed, "I gave the best years of my life to a job I hated, believing one day I'd earn freedom. Then I watched my boss, who had more than I ever would, still chained to the same clock." These are the cracks in the illusion. The proof that freedom as they sold it to you doesn't exist, not because freedom isn't real, but because they couldn't risk you remembering the kind that can't be bought, taxed, or controlled. And that is the secret the rich know and live by. Freedom is not earned. It is claimed. Abundance is not rare. It is natural. But you cannot touch either while you're hypnotized by the fake version they hand you. The moment you see the illusion for what it is, the moment you admit to yourself that the normal life you were promised is a trap, the game begins to crumble. And when it does, you finally see what the system has spent your whole life trying to hide. You were never meant to beg for freedom. It was yours all along. While you were taught to survive, the wealthy were taught to script reality. This is the secret. They guard without ever saying it out loud. The world doesn't respond to hard work alone. It responds to the script running inside your mind. But no one ever told you that your thoughts, your beliefs, your state of being were the blueprint for the life you live. They couldn't let you know because if you did, the entire system built on your obedience would collapse. So they handed you a different script. Work hard. Be grateful for what little you have. Don't question the rules. Success is rare. And it's not for everyone. And you memorized it, repeated it, lived it, believing it was the only truth. All the while, a different group of people was playing a different game entirely. The wealthy understand something you were trained to ignore, that life mirrors certainty, not struggle. They hold inner states that pull opportunities, connections, and wealth towards them almost magnetically. They don't wake up asking if they'll succeed. They wake up knowing it's already done. Their script says, "The world bends for me because I am aligned with abundance." And reality, obedient as ever, follows the story they tell it. This isn't fantasy. It's a psychological truth you've experienced yourself in small ways. Remember the times when you walked into a room fully confident and people seemed drawn to you? Or the days you expected everything to go wrong and it did? That isn't luck. It's the mind scripting reality. The difference is, you've been programmed to use this power, unconsciously, often against yourself, while they've been taught to use it deliberately, relentlessly, until it feels as natural as breathing. The conditioning you received was precise. They trained you to link worth to exhaustion, to believe wealth only comes to those who sacrifice everything, to feel guilty for wanting more, fearful of stepping out of line, ashamed of desiring freedom beyond survival. This was no accident. It was to keep you playing by rules that keep power concentrated in the hands of those who know the real secret. Because if you ever rewrote your script, if you stopped believing in scarcity and started expecting abundance as a birthright, the entire structure of control would fall apart. Billions of people would stop trading their time for crumbs. Entire industries built on your fear and self-doubt would cease to exist overnight. They need you following their script, because your true one, the one you forgot, would make you untouchable. I once heard a man who had escaped the system say, "The day I stopped begging life to treat me well and started deciding it would, the world rearranged itself around me." That's what the rich know. Decision bends reality. Not decisions of action alone, but decisions of identity, the inner stance that says, "This is who I am and the world has no choice but to respond." And while you were trained to constantly question yourself, to constantly ask permission, they were trained to never doubt. That certainty, that unshakable alignment with abundance is their true wealth. Not the money itself, but the mindset that makes money inevitable. And until you see that, until you strip away the false script you've been reciting all your life, you'll keep living someone else's story, believing it's your own. But the moment you start writing your own, the same power they've had all along will finally be yours. There is a reason why every time you imagine yourself wealthy, free, living without fear of bills or boundaries, shadow immediately follows. A whisper of guilt, a flicker of fear, a sudden thought that maybe you're asking for too much, that maybe wanting more makes you greedy, selfish, or wrong. This didn't appear in you by accident. It was planted there long before you could defend yourself, carefully woven into every story, every lesson, every example of goodness you were shown. The system understood that to truly enslave a mind, you cannot just chain its body. You must convince it that its own desires are sinful, that reaching for power is dangerous, that abundance belongs to someone else, and so they buried you under two weights heavier than steel, fear and guilt. Fear was their first weapon. They taught you to fear lack, to fear failure, to fear what people would think if you tried and stumbled. They told you that stepping out of line, asking for more, breaking the pattern would end in ruin, that you would be ridiculed, rejected, punished. And fear keeps you still, doesn't it? How many dreams have you silenced because the thought of losing what little you had seemed worse than trying for more? How many times have you stayed in places that drained your soul because fear told you the unknown was worse? This fear doesn't protect you. It cages you. It makes you a perfect servant to a system that thrives on your hesitation, because while you're frozen, the game moves on without you, and the few who remember the truth take everything you were told to wait for. Then came guilt, their second weapon, sharper than fear because it turns you against yourself. They trained you to believe that wanting abundance makes you ungrateful for what you already have, that asking for freedom is selfish when others are suffering, that desiring wealth makes you one of them, the very people you've been told to despise. And so, you shrink, you hide your dreams, you pretend you're satisfied with less, telling yourself it's humble or moral, while secretly dying inside because you know this isn't what you were born for. But the truth they never wanted you to find is this: guilt is the lock on your prison, and you've been holding the key the whole time. The wealthy feel no guilt for living in abundance, not because they're heartless, but because they were never programmed to feel ashamed of their own power. They don't ask if they're worthy, they assume they are. And reality, obedient as ever, agrees with them. I once read the words of a man who escaped the system, and they burned into my mind. They made us believe it was noble to suffer and shameful to want more. That was the greatest lie ever told. And it is a lie, a carefully crafted one, repeated so often it feels like truth. But it's not truth. You were not born to be small. You were not born to shrink so others feel comfortable. You were not born to trade your life for scraps and call it virtue. The fear you carry was given to you. The guilt you feel was taught to you. And the moment you see that, the weight begins to lift. Because beneath the programming, beneath all the noise and chains and lies, your true nature has always been abundance. You don't have to earn it. You don't have to deserve it. You only have to remember it. And when you do, no system, no power, no force on earth can make you forget again. If fear and guilt are the chains, distraction is the blindfold. Because here's the truth they don't want you to realize. You could break free at any moment if you had enough silence to hear yourself. Think. If you ever sat still long enough to question why you live the way you do, why you obey rules no one can explain, why you've traded your time, your dreams, your soul for promises that never arrive, the whole illusion would crumble. But you don't, do you? You can't. Not because you don't want to, but because the world they built for you is a machine of noise designed to keep you running, scrolling, consuming, reacting, too exhausted and overstimulated to ever wake up. They've turned distraction into an economy, and your stolen attention is their richest resource. Everywhere you look, there's something pulling you away from yourself. A screen flashing headlines meant to make you afraid or angry. Endless feeds filled with lives that seem bigger, shinier, richer than yours. Advertisements whispering you are incomplete, but you can buy the missing piece. Even your moments of rest are filled with noise, the kind that keeps you numb but never free. They've replaced true presence with artificial stimulation, silence with entertainment, depth with speed. And all of it serves one purpose: to keep you asleep inside the cage, too busy surviving, too busy comparing, too busy chasing crumbs to ever notice the door has been unlocked all along. The wealthy know something different. They know silence is power. They know clarity is dangerous to the system because clarity leads to choice, and choice leads to freedom. They create space to think, to imagine, to decide who they are, and how life will bend to meet them. Meanwhile, you've been programmed to fill every empty moment with distraction, because the last thing they want is for you to hear your own voice, to remember your own authority. Imagine if millions of people stopped consuming, stopped reacting, stopped running long enough to ask one forbidden question. What if the entire game is rigged? The system cannot afford that awakening. So they keep you entertained, keep you stressed, keep you hooked on noise that feels urgent but means nothing. I once heard a woman who broke out of this cycle say, "I didn't change my life when I worked harder. I changed it the day I stopped letting the world think for me." That's what they fear most, the moment you pull your attention back from the circus they built for you. Because attention is power. Wherever your focus goes, reality follows. And as long as they can keep you focused on what they feed you, fear, outrage, endless scrolling, you never remember the truth. You never look up and realize you're not broken. You are not powerless. You are not meant for scraps. You were born to create, to choose, to shape your life like the wealthy already do. But you can't reclaim what you don't see. And until you cut through the noise, they know you'll keep living their script, never writing your own. There is a cruel story you were told long before you could question it. A story whispered in classrooms, carved into religion, repeated in every conversation about success and failure. The story says that wealth, freedom, and joy are not birthrights. They are rewards. Rewards for the chosen, the special, the exceptionally gifted or endlessly hard-working few. You were taught that abundance is something you must earn, prove yourself worthy of, fight for until you're too tired to keep going. And if you don't have it yet, if you're still struggling, then maybe, deep down, you don't deserve it. This idea has kept more people enslaved than chains or walls ever could, because when you believe you're unworthy, you stop asking, you stop dreaming, you stop claiming what was always yours, living small and calling it humility, when in truth, it's just a prison you were tricked into building for yourself. The wealthy were never taught this lie. Their children are raised differently. They grow up hearing a different script. Of course you will succeed. Of course you are worthy. Of course you deserve the best the world has to offer. They aren't told to beg for opportunities. They are taught to expect them. They aren't told to wait until they've suffered enough. They are told wealth is natural, inevitable, theirs to command. And because reality bends to belief, they live what they were programmed to expect, while you live what you were trained to fear. The system knows this, which is why it works so hard to keep you believing in the myth of deserving. It keeps you in line, working harder and harder, sacrificing more and more, hoping one day you'll be chosen, never realizing there was never anyone holding the key but you. I once read a testimony from a man who broke the cycle, and his words were simple but devastating. "I thought I had to earn freedom until I saw people born into it. Then I realized the game wasn't about work, it was about permission, and I was the only one who could give it to myself." This is the secret they never wanted you to find. Abundance is not a prize. It is not a finish line you crawl to after years of suffering. It is a frequency you tune into, a state of being you claim before the world can give it to you. But they buried this truth beneath layers of shame and false morality. They taught you that wanting more makes you selfish. They glorified struggle as a badge of honor. They dressed poverty in words like virtue, simplicity, and humility to keep you from questioning why those in power never lived by the rules they gave you. This programming runs so deep that even when you hear the truth, you flinch. Part of you resists, whispers, "No, that can't be right. I have to prove myself first." But prove yourself to who? To what? The entire concept of deserving is a cage built to keep you outside the life you were born for. The rich don't live by this rule. They assume worthiness, they expect abundance, and the world agrees with their decision. The only difference between you and them is the script you've been reciting. And the moment you burn that script, the moment you stop waiting for permission to be free, you reclaim what the system stole from you, the undeniable truth that you were always enough. From the moment you could listen, you were surrounded by voices claiming to know better than you. Teachers, bosses, politicians, preachers, experts on every screen, all repeating the same rules, the same warnings, the same narrow map of what life is supposed to be. And because you were a child, because you wanted to belong, because you wanted to be safe, you believed them. You handed over your inner compass to people who promised they knew the way. But here's the truth the wealthy understand, the truth the system never wants you to discover. Most of these so-called authorities don't know anything about freedom, power, or truth. They were just reading from the same script you were, reciting lies so often they sound like wisdom. The difference is, someone gave them a podium, and told you to obey. Think about it. How many experts have told you that wealth is rare, reserved for the lucky or the gifted, that you must grind endlessly, sacrifice joy, trade time for money and hope, life rewards you later? How many times have you been told to lower your expectations, to stop dreaming, to be realistic? These words don't come from truth, they come from programming. They are control mechanisms disguised as advice, repeated by people who never questioned the rules themselves. And because they stand on stages, write books, wear titles and suits, you assume they know something you don't. But if they were truly free, truly powerful, would they be teaching you to settle, to suffer, to obey? Or would they be handing you the key they've been told to keep hidden? The wealthy have always understood the game of false authority. They know power doesn't come from truth, it comes from perception. Give someone a uniform, a title, a platform, and suddenly their words are treated like law, even if they're empty. The system builds these figures not to liberate you, but to keep you in line, to make sure you don't wander too far from the path they've chosen for you. Politicians tell you what's possible. Economists tell you what you can't afford. Media tells you what you should fear. Religious leaders tell you what God wants from you. And beneath all of it, the same message is whispered: don't think for yourself. Don't trust your own knowing. Obey. I once heard a man who woke up from this conditioning say, "The first time I realized the expert didn't know what he was talking about, my whole life cracked open." That's how fragile their power really is. It only works as long as you believe they know more about your life than you do. The truth is, every rule you've been handed was written by people no wiser than you, often less free than you, but given authority to make you doubt yourself. And doubt is the foundation of control, because a person who trusts their own inner guidance cannot be ruled, cannot be herded, cannot be sold, lies dressed as truth. This is why the rich seem untouchable, not because they have all the answers, but because they refuse to hand over authority. They know the experts are actors in a play designed to keep you small. They know real power is listening inward, deciding reality for yourself, claiming space without asking for approval. And until you see through the costumes, until you stop mistaking titles for truth, you'll keep obeying a script written to keep you in chains. But the moment you reclaim your own authority, the whole theater collapses, and you finally remember the truth. You were never meant to be a follower in a rigged game. You were meant to write your own rules and live them without apology. There comes a moment, quiet, devastating, unstoppable, when the lies can no longer hold. It doesn't happen with fireworks or applause. It happens in stillness, in that raw second where you feel the weight of every false script that's ever been handed to you. You see it all. The conditioning, the programming, the cages painted gold. You see the fear they planted in your chest, the guilt they stitched into your skin, the distractions that kept you numb, the false authorities you bowed to without even realizing you were on your knees. And for the first time, you feel the depth of the theft. They didn't just take your time, your energy, your dreams. They tried to take you. They built an entire reality where you would never dare to remember that you were born free, born powerful, born enough. And in that moment you do remember. And it changes everything. It's not an idea. It's not a motivational phrase. It's not some external promise. It's a fire that rises in your bones, a knowing that doesn't ask for proof, a voice inside you that has been whispering for years but was drowned out by the noise finally roars awake. It says, you were never broken. You were trained to believe you were. You were never powerless. You were trained to give your power away. You were never less than. You were only convinced to play small so others could play kings. And this truth hits you like thunder, shaking the walls of every limitation you've ever accepted. For the first time, you see that the chains were never locked. They were only illusions wrapped around your mind. And once you see an illusion for what it is, it can't hold you anymore. The rich have always known this. The truly free have always known this. The system isn't built on their power. It's built on your forgetting. The moment you remember, the game ends. Because suddenly you stop waiting for permission, stop obeying invisible rules, stop trading your life for crumbs. You realize you have the same access to creation, the same birthright to abundance, the same authority over reality as anyone who has ever been called powerful. The difference is no longer them and you. The difference is only sleep and awakening. And now that you're awake, you cannot go back. I once heard a woman who broke through this conditioning Say if they taught me to bow my whole life. The day I stood up, the world looked different. Not because it changed, but because I finally saw it from my true height. That is what remembering feels like. The buildings don't vanish, the system doesn't dissolve overnight, but suddenly you're not afraid of it anymore. You stop playing by its rules. You stop asking whether you're worthy of the life you were born to live, because now you know. You were always worthy, always powerful, always free. The greatest secret of the wealthy was never a trick or a tactic. It was the decision to believe in their own authority, while you were trained to forget yours. And now that you've seen the truth, no amount of programming can make you forget again. Is this story resonating with you? Leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Now let's continue. So here you are, standing at the edge of the life you were told to live, and for the first time, you can see the truth clearly. The scripts they handed you, the conditioning they carved into your bones, the rules that made you crawl when you were meant to fly, they were never yours. They belonged to a system that needed your silence, your obedience, your forgetting. And now, you have a choice. A choice you didn't even know you had before this moment. You can keep playing small, keep reciting their lines, keep handing your power to false authorities and calling it safety. Or you can burn the script, step off the stage they built for you, and finally, live a life that belongs to no one but you. This choice won't feel easy. It will terrify you at first, because freedom always does when you've been caged your whole life. But the fear isn't a warning. It's a sign you're leaving their story and walking into your own. And here's the quiet miracle. You don't need their permission. You never did. The rich, the powerful, the truly free, they don't have what you lack. They just never believed the lies you were taught to swallow. They were told the world was theirs, and they agreed. The only difference between you and them is that you believed you needed to earn what was already yours, but not anymore. Now you know the truth. And truth is something you can never unlearn once it's remembered. The wealth you want, the freedom you crave, the deep sense of being alive that you've been searching for, it doesn't come from fighting harder, pleasing louder, waiting longer. It comes from the decision to stop giving your mind to the system that profits from your forgetting. It comes from reclaiming your own authority, your own frequency, your own life. I once read words from someone who had walked this path before, and they've never left me. The greatest rebellion isn't to fight the system. It's to stop being who it trained you to be. That's the invitation in front of you now. Not to join a revolution out there, but to start one in here, in the quiet place inside where you finally stop asking for permission to be yourself. You stop living for approval. Stop following the invisible map drawn by hands that never cared about your joy. You stop letting them write your destiny and start writing it with your own breath, your own hands, your own unstoppable heart. That's the real secret the rich have always known. Not money, not tricks, not connections. Just this one unshakable truth. You are the authority over your own life. And the moment you believe it, the system loses its power over you forever. So, as you walk back into the world after hearing this, remember, you were never broken. You were never powerless. You were never meant to live by their rules. The door was always open, and now you have the choice to step through it. Will you keep reciting their script, or will you finally remember your own? Have you ever done something kind that changed a life forever? Tell me in the comments, and if this story made you feel something, share it with someone who needs to remember who they are.